Welcome back to my channel for another short Leica episode, and the Leica SL2 as well as the SL2-S got new firmware. The new firmware number is 5.0 and clearly I have to try out the new features and will explain them in detail here in the next few minutes. Let's kick off the video. The first new feature is well known to Leica-M shooters because it's a feature we have in the Leica M10 cameras and also recently in the Leica M11, and it is perspective control, and we find this in the menu. If we go here to page number, let me go there, it's page number 3, and then we go down here and then we can toggle off and on perspective control. So if perspective control is off, we have the usual live view here. I can focus and I can take my image, and if we switch it on, and that's what I'm going to do right now, then we get some lines here and you see that frame moving, and perspective is automatically controlled in the way you notice from keystone correction in Lightroom, for instance. So let's try to take a very kinky shot here in some way. Let's take this one here, so, and let's take a shot. And then in Lightroom, I will show in a moment how you can use this information, which is, by the way, stored in the metadata and can be evaluated by Lightroom also on the RAW file. Perspective control, as I just showed it, is applied in the camera body to the image. And typically, if you apply some operation or manipulation to an image, it's only applied to the JPEG file and not to the RAW file. For instance, if you apply a color filter, it will affect only the JPEG, but not the digital negative. Here it's different. I imported now both the DNG on the left-hand side and the JPEG file on the right-hand side into Lightroom. And you see perspective control is nicely applied to both images. But on the JPEG, that's end of story. I cannot reverse perspective control and see the image in the way I took it. And that's different on the digital negative or the RAW file, because if I go into the develop section, and in the develop section in Lightroom, I go down to the transformation section, I can actually see what I saw when I did hold the camera in front of me, and perspective control was indicated by these frame lines in the way we just saw it in the live shooting. And the way to see in Lightroom what I saw before in the live view on the SL2's LCD screen is to push here on update, and then I get the perspective in the way I saw it in the camera. And I can also get these lines back, these frame lines, by pushing here on that symbol, and then I see exactly what correction was applied to get the perspective right. And that is of course very useful. I can also go here back to reset, and then I see the perspective control applied again, but I do not lose the original information of the frame which I indeed shot when I took that image. And of course, if I reset it back, I still see on the boundaries of the image the frame lines which were used for perspective control. It's working via the so-called guided section in the transform section in Lightroom, but I can also get these lines away by pushing again on that symbol here, and then I have the RAW file with perspective controlled in the way I wanted to have it. But the original information, as I said, is not getting lost because I can always reverse it, which is not working on the JPEG file. Quite ingenious, that concept. The second new feature is in the same way as perspective control, which I personally was waiting for to finally come to the Leica SL2, a very useful feature, and it concerns customization of function buttons. I want to play this through by means of that function button here, and typically when I push it, currently ISO choice is assigned to that function button. So if I press it, I can choose here my ISO value, which is straightforward. But if you long press and hold it, you can also select what function will actually be assigned to that button. And I have here currently drive mode, interval, multi-shot, exposure bracketing, and so on, a bunch of things which are important to me. In the previous firmware, you could here choose and select out of 55, if I'm not mistaken, 55 different choices. And I shortened this down now to just the most essential ones for me. And the way to do this is, and that's the new feature, you can pre-select what will occur here as a possibly assigned function to that button if you press and hold it in the menu. And I'm going to show that quickly. So if we go here to the menu, and then we go to customize control, and then in customize control we have function buttons. And here I can now, in the same way as on my favorite selection, toggle on and off what I want to have. So let's have a look here. I have toggled on drive mode, interval, multi-shot, and so on. And if I press and hold that button, that's exactly what I can choose to be assigned to that function button. And if I now want to include some additional function here, I go back to that menu and then I go to FN buttons. And let's say currently magnification here is not available as a choice. So let's toggle this on. Let's go back here. Let's press and hold that button. And now magnification appears here as an entry and as a function which I can assign to that function button. How nice is that? I can deactivate this again. Let's go back into the menu. And if I go here again to FN buttons and say magnification is not one of the features I potentially want to assign to that function button, I can just toggle it off. And then when I press and hold this again, magnification is no longer selectable. Easy like that, and very useful because in the past, when you toggle through 55 functions, you basically get lost. And now you can make a pre-selection, maybe 10 or 15 functions which are important for you. You can assign them to all of these function buttons here if you want, and then you have a much smoother workflow. And then the last new feature here actually concerns lens profiles. And sometimes you shoot the Leica SL2 with an adapter with no electronic contacts and a different brand lens. And in this case, you typically need to specify what the focal length is in order to make the in-body image stabilization work. That's very important. If the IBIS does not know the focal length, it will not work effectively. And the way to change this is here in the menu. If you go into camera settings, and then in camera settings, we have here, if you scroll down, lens profiles. It's currently grayed out because for the Vario Elmarit 24-70, the lens profile is known to the camera because it's a Leica lens and it also communicates via the electronic contacts with the camera body. But for third-party lenses used with adapters on the Leica SL2, the focal length might not be known. And then here in this menu entry, it can be set up and then the in-body image stabilization will work like a charm. Let's make this a bit more explicit by quickly playing it through. And let's switch off the camera now. Let's remove the SL lens here. Let's put this aside. And let's say I want to shoot a Leica-R lens. So this one here. So this is a perspective control lens. If you look at that, it's the PC Super Angulon R widest open f2.8 28mm. I've shown this lens various times on my channel. It's from the Leica-R system, so it is a Leica lens, but if I mount it with an adapter on my Leica SL2 body without electronic contacts, like this one for instance from Novoflex, so this connects Leica-R lenses to Leica SL camera bodies, then there is no communication going on between the lens and between the camera body because this no contact adapter sits in between. So let's mount the adapter on the camera body. I think this should sit here, should snap in. Here we go, sits firmly, fine. And let's mount the lens. So let's see where we have here the right alignment. Here we go. So now the lens is on. By the way, it's a fantastic lens. Check out the videos I have on my channel on the perspective control lens. And now actually we should see that menu entry here no longer grayed out. Let's see. And let's try this out. We go to camera settings, and then in camera settings, we should see now somewhere lens profiles. Here we go. And currently it's off, but now I can switch it on and I can say here, this is for an R lens, and I can specify now which R lens we are talking about. Isn't that nice? Every single R lens Leica ever produced is in the inventory here. And we go now down and I go here to 28mm is tempting, but it's not what we are looking for. I'm looking for tilt shift 28mm, and that's the one we choose. And then you see here it already says Super Angulon R 1 to 2.8 28mm. So this R lens, which I now mounted with an adapter without any contacts, is identified, and the in-body image stabilization in the Leica SL2 camera body will work. But in addition, we'll also see the specified lens, which I mounted here, in the metadata of the image. And that's quite nice because then you always know what you're dealing with. Now you might argue, if you need the focal length of the mounted lens here for in-body image stabilization, what if you have a Leica-R zoom lens? So let's try this out. I switch this off again. Let's unmount here the lens. Let's get this closed up and put aside. And let's take an R zoom lens, which is this one here. This is also from the Leica-R system. Is a 21 to 35mm lens. So let's try to mount this one here. Let's get this here on the adapter. Here we go. Now we have a Leica SL2 with a wide angle Leica-R lens. and the adapter sits in between without electronic contacts. So let's switch the camera on again. Let's go to that menu entry here on page number 5, camera settings. Then we go here into lens profiles and see currently it didn't change the super angulon. I have to do this manually. So we are still in the R lens system and we now have to find the 21-35 lens. So let's scroll down here. These are all prime lenses, but once in a while I guess we'll come to zoom lenses. And let's continue for a while. See, all these lenses are here. This is absolutely fantastic. And here we go. This is the 21-35 f3.524. It's an aspherical lens. This is exactly what I mounted. So I choose this and then it's registered as the lens I'm currently shooting with. And now the in-body image stabilization will work and you will also see the correct lens entry in the metadata of the image. Quite nice, very well done, Leica. This also works for M lenses. So here's an inventory of all possible M lenses you might want to use on the Leica SL2. And then you have here, and that's really a great feature and that is really new, other lens. And on the other lens, you can now just choose the focal length and then the focal length will be registered, it will appear in the metadata and it will make the in-body image stabilization work. And that is really good. And here you could also manually fill in any kinky focal length you might want to shoot on the Leica SL2. Very nice, very good. So these are the main features which I think require some explanation and hopefully this is useful for you. Let's quickly have a look what else has been updated in firmware version 5.0. Perspective control we covered. Then we have some tiny little improvement on ISO settings in the video mode. The lens profile menu has been supplemented. I think I showed that in detail. We have the drop-down list for the function buttons and we have an improvement on supported lenses. You know, we have some error correction on EXIF information and 2 other corrections here. So there is nothing else to say on that firmware update, but I think the 3 main features in the way I explained them in detail, they are really an improvement and they make it worthwhile for you to update your Leica SL2 or SL2-S if you have these cameras. If you liked that short tutorial, please don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel. There's always more to come. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and healthy. And of course, peace out.